Mr. Atkins, do you want to lead us in the pledge, or would you prefer, how about your son?
We have to do the consent agenda and such.
We're going to say the pledge first, Mr. Thomas.
All right.
I
Okay.
appreciate, can you just open the meeting and then we'll select the moderator and then we can do
We're
that?
going to say the pledge before we select a moderator,
Got to
please.
call the meeting to order.
All right, I'm calling the meeting to order as clerk, and I'm going to ask that the young Mr. Atkins lead us in the pledge this afternoon, this evening.
I'll take it. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You're right, there is no pause.
And now I'm
There is
to ask if there's going to be a motion for chairing this meeting in the absence of Supervisor Bennett. Mr. Thomas.
Madam Clerk, I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Trustee Atkins to preside over this evening's meeting as acting supervisor.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Atkins.
Your computer.
Hey, buddy. Thanks. Hey, buddy. Okay, good evening. I ask for the approval of the consent agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Support. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'll ask for citizen comment. Keep in mind, this is for citizen comment not related to the two public hearings which will take place tonight. One being a public hearing for the Grand Valley Special Assessment District, and the other for the public multi-purpose non-motorized pathway.
Mr. Chair, before you begin, could you accept the motion to approve the regular agenda as well? Because you did the special.
Oh, sorry. I'm looking for a motion to approve the regular agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so public comment? Go to the back of the room. Anybody? Left side.
How you doing? My name is Arthur Woodson. I'm from Flint, Michigan, 402 West Stewart Avenue. It came to my attention that a lot of pastors are using parsonage as a way of getting around paying their property taxes. And it's not fair to each individual in this township that they are doing that. So as I looked into it, it's a broad definition. But what I did find in 1954, Congress overhauled the tax code and among other things codified the rules for tax-free housing outside the ministerial context as described more fully below in section 3A. The new 119 mandated that the housing be one in kind, on site, required by the employer. And then they revamped it in 2002. What they did was said if they live off site, they get a housing allowance from the church, but they still have to pay the property taxes. So now if you want to get around that, what they would do is make their house into a church and they wouldn't pay property taxes. So if they do that, they still have to come before the planning commission and ask for a special land use, which a lot of them haven't done. And then on top of that, it still has to have traffic, church services, Bible studies. But the house used as a parsonage supposed to be on site locally. So say, for instance, if you pastoring over in Flint, but you living over in Grand Blanc and saying that the house belonged to the church, you can't do that. You cannot get past property taxes. The church over in Flint gives you a housing allowance and you still pay the property taxes. You're able to claim, you don't have to pay income taxes and all that, but you still have to pay property taxes. So you have a lot of houses that are being used as as parsonage. And that's something that you all need to check into because people are not paying their taxes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Woodson? Do you have the address of that home that you're referring to?
Oh man, I don't have it with me. I think it's
Is that
1151.
1511 Wagon Wheel?
Correct.
Excuse me, Mr. Thomas, what was that address?
1511 Wagon Wheel.
Thank you.
I believe that's what I read in Mr. Kilbreath's article.
Any other public or citizen comments not related to the public hearings? Okay, with that, I'll close citizen comment and move on to public hearing for the Green Valley Special Assessment District Road Repaving Project. Anyone have any comments?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Name's Don Martin, 2419 Valley Lane Drive, Grand Blanc. Just a few questions really for the Genesee County Road Commission. It's a 5-year assessment, basically a 5-year warranty is what we were told on it. Just some of the roads are in really bad shape, you know, the subsurface and all that. So, I mean, in the 5 years, what do we get? And then after that, is there any guarantees? Or I know the township said they'll do the seal cracking probably for 5 years. And after that, is it just back to the subdivision? That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments related to Green Valley?
Probably Dennis can answer his question.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, one of the ways that we handle this sometimes is we let folks make their comments and then we'll kind of gather them up and then let Mr. Hill answer the ones that relate to him, let the township answer the ones that relate to us. If you want to proceed that way, that sometimes is a pretty efficient way to go.
okay. Thank you.
Mine is for Mr. Hill, basically, so do you want me to wait?
No, I think you can go ahead and give your comments and
Okay.
ask your questions, we'll write them down and then we'll have them respond.
Okay, I'm Mary Bedford.
Would you pull the microphone down, please, Mrs. Bedford? Thank you.
Mary Bedford, 7281 Green Valley Drive, Grand Blanc, not Florida like last time. And I wanted to just say a couple of things that we're all excited about having something done, you know, for our subdivision road-wise. Anyone that has driven it lately will find that there are potholes in there that are 1.5 feet deep. And I know that the main vote was to do the second option that we had. And all I know is that if the potholes are not filled properly, we're going to be right back where we started from if we're just going to slap, you know, tar over that, asphalt over that. So I just wanted to make that comment that to be sure that we're going to be covered with what's there now, because it's like driving you know, in circles, and you worry about oncoming traffic, and we have kids and walkers and all of that. So I would appreciate knowing that we're going to make sure that we're going to have some protection on those potholes that are there, because they're really, really bad. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle Clark, 7366 Green Valley Drive. I wanted to know who was doing this. When I read it, almost looked like the county was planning on doing these repairs. And if that's the case, why wasn't it contracted out or bids weren't put in for any private companies? Because I don't really see the county doing a good job paving any of the roads or taking care of any of the roads. I guess you can answer.
Travis Neville, 7331 Green Valley Drive. I just moved in September, and I almost didn't move in because of the roads. But thank you for reinforcing my confidence in Grand Blanc Township that I wasn't moving to Flint and I was moving to Grand Blanc, and they would be fixing it. So very excited you guys are getting it done. I work in the construction industry, so really curious about exactly what is getting done. We're taking it all the way down to the dirt, you know, all the questions everybody else has. I'm interested in hearing as well, but you know, I'm here to see how it's going and see what you guys are going to do. But again, excited you're getting it done. Thanks for the help.
Thank you.
Hello, Katie Berry, 7435 Green Valley Drive. A couple things this meeting. I wasn't sure, again, when we were looking at starting the construction. I don't think I ever got that, if it gets voted on and passes, of course. And I wanted to know if you guys are planning on patching the potholes relatively soon, or if we're waiting on doing the construction. I wasn't sure about that. And if we were gonna get anything further, like in the mail, about like detailed plans about what's gonna happen when. So I was just curious about that. If you can.
Superintendent Lehman, would you like to make a comment on, in terms of communication? Are we going to be sending some information out, or?
Yeah, actually, DPW Director Jeff Sears already had something put together, and it was going out. I thought it had already gone out, but I know that he's been in communication with Road Commission. They have a plan when it starts. I know that Richard can answer those questions whenever you're ready to bring them up.
Okay. Any other comment, public comment? Okay, with there being none, I'll close public hearing for Green Valley Special Assessment District road repaving project.
Let's answer some questions.
Like to bring Mr. Hill up for some follow-up answers, questions.
Okay, so make sure I don't miss anything. Can I have those questions read back to me, Kathy?
Thank you, Richard. Okay. Number one, there are bad potholes already in the roads.
Mm-hmm.
Will those be repaired, or will it be done in conjunction with the project of having the contractor do the roads themselves?
I don't know our maintenance department's schedule, whether they plan to be out there this next month or not. I could check into that, but I would think that they'll probably wait until the project starts in May before they want to do any,
Okay, if you didn't hear Mr. Hill, he said this project will start in May. That was one of the questions. Mr. Neville asked, what are you going to do? Explain to them what you're going to do to the roads, because they had two options. Mm-hmm. One was the maintenance and one was a total redo, and some of them don't understand the difference.
Right. The option, the preferred road commission and option of the complete reconstruct was voted down by the homeowners, and they decided to go with a resurfacing option. Basically, we're going to resurface the existing roads as they are with 3 inches of new asphalt after filling in the potholes that exist now. The intersection at Grand Blanc Road will be reconstructed with a wider intersection with curb and gutter and attached to the bike path there.
Okay.
Can everyone hear the answers in the back?
The other question that I think they need clarified is someone thinks that the road commission themselves is going to do the repairs, Mr. Hill, and I think you need to explain that you did go out for bids in that process.
Right. We went out for bids at least twice, and it may have been 3 times to get a good price that was reasonable for the homeowners. The contractor firm of Ace Saginaw Asphalt is low bidder, and they will be the contractor in charge of the work.
I know from the last meeting they also were wondering, are they going to be told when you do things, if they're going to have to move their mailboxes and things like that in order to know how to get in and out, because they have only the one entrance.
Okay, the contractor has to give 3 working days notice what they're going to work on your driveway, in particular if they're going to temporarily block access to your driveway. And because of the nature of the project, the only thing they're doing at your driveway is paving a 5-foot wide apron from the edge of the road into your driveway. And that, as soon as they're done rolling it out, you'll be able to drive on it. So it's not like you'll not be able to drive on your driveway for hours at a time. The mailboxes, the post office doesn't like driving through a construction zone to deliver mail. So one of the first things the contractor will do, will put what's called a gang mailbox at Grand Blanc Road. So when people come into the subdivision at the end of the day, they can pick their mail up there. And that's purely to service the post office because, like I said, they don't drive through construction zones.
One other question from the previous Tuesday meeting 2 weeks ago. Are you going to be taking out the tubes underneath the driveways and putting new ones in along with the ditching?
No. Okay. That option, again, was option 1 that we were proposed to do that, and that was voted down by the homeowners.
But there will be ditching?
No. It's resurfacing the road as it is now.
I think I hit every question.
There's a question,
Mr. Thomas.
through you, Mr. Chair, to Clerk Lane. There's a question on the township's responsibility for maintenance and upkeep, and there's a question on the warranty and the maintenance and upkeep of the warranty.
Okay.
There is no warranty on the work. The work is done to road commission standards and under our inspection. And once we certify the work of the contractor's responsibilities end. So if anything goes wrong after that, it comes back to us.
So there was no 5-year warranty as stated?
No, we do not do a warranty on any projects at this time.
Trustee Massey.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a question for you, Mr. Hill. Do you get into best practice? You said something that makes me very nervous, and every time I hear it, chills goes through my body. The lowest bidder.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like hearing that because of my past experience.
The lowest qualified bidder.
Okay. It leads me to the question for you. Do you guys look at best practice? And let me give you an example that you may be familiar with. On Emerald Road, at the intersection of Grand Blanc Road, okay, for years, you guys did many patches or whatever you want to call it, okay? And every year you had to go back and do the same thing. I think the last 2 years, the last time you did something at the intersection there, which is on Emory Road, okay? It's the best that has ever been done. So it's still intact. So do you guys look at those kind of practice? And what I mean by that, getting back to the lowest bidder. If the lowest bidder comes in, although he may have a good process based on his interpretation, but the process that that company uses doesn't last but 1 year or 2 years, how do you determine that we cannot use this bidder anymore based on some of the other past practices?
We don't turn a project over to a contractor and let him do whatever he wants. He has to construct it according to the plans and specifications that he bid on. And our inspector is there to make sure he does so.
So my question is, since I think it was an excellent job at Emory and Hill Road.
I'll pass it on to our maintenance department. Thank you.
So do you know what that process was? I'm not asking you specifically, was that documented?
That work was done by our maintenance department, and I'm not familiar with exactly what they did.
Okay.
But I will pass your thanks on to them.
Trustee Thomas.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Superintendent Limita. One of the questions was, what is the township's responsibility and a warranty work through the township?
We don't have any responsibility when it comes to warranty. What we will do is we'll crack seal that repair for 5 years, which is standard township policy. The board's directed us that during the course of the repayment period, and since this is a 5-year repayment, it means we'll do crack sealing for 5 years.
And I'd like to thank your township for doing that work. That's above and beyond what most townships do.
Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chair, to Mr. Attorney Laddie, can we ask the public if there are any other questions, since we don't always have Mr. Hill here, in case we've missed something?
We have closed the public hearing, but I think if the chairman wants to ask if there are any follow-up questions, he can certainly do that, but don't reopen the public hearing, that's already been.
I understand that.
Yeah, now that the homeowners have heard Mr. Hill speak, if there's any other additional questions, please use this time to ask anything else.
Okay. Sorry, you're quite a bit taller than I am. 7435 Green Valley Road, Katie Berry. So now that we kind of heard plans, I know it's starting in May. Do we know how long it's going to take? I don't know. May to September, okay. And then,
Let me check my notes. I got so many projects.
okay, it's a long time.
Oh, June, end of June.
Okay, May to the end of June. And I know we talked about mailboxes and the amount of time that we may or may not be able to pull into our driveway being a couple of hours. In terms of street access, is there going to be times when we wouldn't be able to access the road, or is it going to be one side shut down? I was just curious about that.
Mr. Hill, if you could.
If everybody can hear me, no, the contractor has to allow local access at all times. So you'll be driving through a construction zone, obviously, but he has to allow you to get to and from your houses at all times.
Okay. And then just one more. If we can't have access to like our driveways, is there going to be a place for us to park other than that, or do you not think that that's going to be an issue?
It shouldn't be an issue. They don't do several driveways together at a time. They'll do your driveway, so if you need to come in and park in your neighbor's driveway, hopefully they'll allow you to park there for an hour or so.
Okay. Thank you. That was
Thank
it.
you.
If there's somebody coming up.
How much of the existing material comes out before they put that 3 inches down? They take out 3 inches first, or I feel like if we're putting 3 inches over the junk that's there, that might not be the best move. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but just curious how that process goes.
No, the existing asphalt is too thin to remove any and puts them down and still maintain that structural integrity. So putting 3 inches on top of what's there is the best thing we could do, given the option the homeowners picked at that time to increase the structural integrity of the existing road. Thank you.
Just one last question for you. What is the difference, I mean, the way we're talking now with the mailboxes and with the drainage and all that, I'm not even sure what the difference is anymore between the third option, which was at the bottom, and the second option. Can you briefly, off the top of your head, tell us what that might be?
Mr. Hill, could you come up to the mic for this one? Maybe everyone will be able to hear you a little better.
From what I remember, the third option was an option for our maintenance department to pave it with, I'm not sure how much the thickness of the asphalt they were planning to put down. It might have been only 2 inches, and we're putting 3. And they were not doing any drainage structure repairs, which we are repairing every drainage structure in the area. They were not reconstructing the intersection at Grand Blanc Road, which we are as part of this project. So theirs was a very basic resurfacing. Ours is one step above that.
Steve Bell, 2442 Valley Lane. My question is, if they're adding 3 inches to the road, that's considerably higher. I got a nice blend going up the driveway now. Are they gonna take this up the driveway for a portion? Or are we gonna have a step going into the street?
Please, so everyone can hear, Mr. Hill, if you could.
Yes, each driveway will have a 5-foot apron from the new pavement down to your existing driveway. If they have to go a foot or 2 more than that to smooth it out, they probably will, but 5 feet is what we're planning on.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, we'll move on. We'll open the public hearing for the purpose of receiving comments on the proposed MNRTF grant application for the completion of the public multi-purpose non-motorized pathway along the new Dort Highway extension project. Open up for any comments or questions related to that project.
Monica Shapiro, 9413 Burning Tree, Grand Blanc. First of all, I want to say thank you for working so hard to get non-motorized included in the Dort Highway extension. That is something that everybody, even though a lot of us are against the extension itself, to have non-motorized included in it is a great thing, and we're glad that you're doing that. I have 2 questions. One is, I read in the paper about the original grant that was turned down because we weren't connecting to enough. They couldn't prove that there was a connection to further pathways, so we didn't qualify for a TAP grant based on that. So I would like a little clarification about what we put into that application. What did we say we were trying to connect to? Because it seems to me that we have an existing path on Dort Highway that we could have connected, that we could have said we were going to connect to. It goes from Hill to a little short of Reed, and it's on both sides, and then they pave the shoulders for a little while longer. So I'm wondering, why didn't we look into connecting to that pathway? Why was it all about hopeful future pathways at the other end of the extension? I was talking to Dennis about this during the day, and he kind of answered me, and I'm still going to bring it up here. Then the other thing is, I wish that there was something that could be done to look at putting the pathway on both sides of the extension instead of only on one side. Maybe make it narrower, and if we were connecting to the end of Dort Highway that we have, it would be a more straightforward thing than the curly paths that we're looking at attaching it to. So maybe we could save money with that plan, but pay more now to make it on both sides, but eventually make it connect up to Dort Highway. So I'd like to know the ins and outs of what we applied for and why we were turned down, and if there's any chance of possibly getting it on both sides instead of only on one side.
Thank you. Mr. Lemata, would you like to?
Absolutely. The original grant was through an MDOT TAP grant, Transportation Alternatives, and it had to do because they were doing the Dort Highway extension, so obviously we planned to do that application process for the grant because of the Dort Highway extension was going on. It was an opportunity that was that presented itself. Not that we had said that this is the most highest priority, but it's because they're doing it and they're doing the engineering at that time. So why would we want to try to do it then, is because they're doing wetlands mitigation studies and everything else in order to do that. If we went and proposed it later, then there would be a requirement that we go in and redo all those wetlands mitigation studies, that kind of thing. It would have added hundreds of $1,000s to the project. And so that original grant is just strictly to go along where they're already doing the engineering work and planning in to put in that thing. We also had the opportunity to then seek the easement at the same time from Ascents and Genesis, who has been very forthcoming in wanting to help us to do that. So we did have it attached to the Genesis trails, but the reason we were turned down, and we talked to them all the way through the whole process while they were considering it, is because it doesn't have a direct connection to the existing pathway. So what they recommended at that time in order to get approval is if we would agree to just expand it and go down Cook and then up Embry till we got to Grand Blanc Road. However, that would have added over $1 million to the project that would have been strictly out of township funds, because we were all the way taking everything that was possible for other grant funds.
If we went the other way on Dort Highway, we'd connect to the pathway on Grand Blanc Road directly.
You could have, that would have been all the way, you're talking about going all the way up to Grand Blanc Road off of Dort. All of that would have had to go after, again, easements, do all the engineering and pay for the thing 100% with township funds, because we were maxed out on available grant opportunities that we would have had. That would have been totally on the township's dollar to get all the way up to Grand Blanc Road down that Dort extension, and that would have probably been, again, well over $1 million. Jack?
The other problem with going that way is we have to cross I-75 at some point, and the bridge isn't wide enough to do all of that and meet
The bridge that they're about to build, or the bridge that we already have?
the bridge is already there over I-75. Are you talking about going north on Dort to connect to Grand Blanc Road?
Yeah.
Yeah, that bridge that's already crossed 75 is just going to be big enough for what we're doing with the roadway itself. We can't add trail to it because we're not widening the bridge itself. So that was the other issue with that.
And Jack,
Major issue with that.
I want you to speak to the, why not put it on both sides of the Dort Highway extension? We have to put that as 10 feet wide.
Yeah, we are getting TAP funds. It's a long story. We didn't get the state TAP funds, but we're getting local TAP funds, which is through the Genesee County Metropolitan Planning Organization. So we are getting $441,000 in grant money for that, and that requires us to be 10 feet wide. So that, and along with meeting the...
Even if it's a one-way on one side?
No, we could do...
Narrower, like 5 on each side?
Yeah, it would be... It's a good question, but I think it's just too much...
Especially because there isn't much...
It's going to add some cost to the
There's not
project.
residential easements up that way. It's mostly blank.
Most of the township, there's a non-motorized township path map that was been adopted back in 2006 by the township board. And most of those pathways were meant to be 10-foot, one side, non-motorized pathways. We kind of get them, in most instances, we can get them further away from the roadway and give them their own spot. So otherwise, we'd just be looking at basically sidewalks.
Right.
And sidewalks really don't...
Good, but can't we get it on both sides?
We could, but then we wouldn't be able to have bikeways. So the 10-foot allows for both pedestrian and bicycles.
Could we get 10 foot on both sides? That would be ridiculously expensive.
It would double the cost. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Sort of. And now the way you wanted them.
I still want it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Ed, 7212 Porter Road. We're discussing one of the passions I had when I first got started coming to this board. I noticed Jack Wheatley mentioned 2006. I remember in 2005 talking about a pathway master plan. I was highly involved in that. Been in that back room quite a bit. I support your efforts on pathways. It's very important for our community. Fortunately, it would have started out when my neighbor didn't have no place to walk, and I wanted the pathway going through Bicentennial Park. Well, you never got a chance to walk on it. So I just want to say, I support you in pathways, and we have to make it work. I'd love to be able to walk from Genesis all the way to General Motors there, through Bicentennial Park. And it could be possible someday, and hopefully I'll be around to see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'll close the public hearing for the non-motorized pathway extension project. And we'll move on to a privileged presentation from Ms. Rodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here tonight and to present the actuarial valuation of liabilities associated with the benefits that you provide to your retirees. Currently, there are 75 active you have, I'll explain, you have two reports in front of you. One of them is the actuarial report of the liabilities and the contributions. The other I will just touch on briefly relates to the information that's provided, pretty much the same information, but for your financial reporting. There were, as of this actuarial valuation is as of December 31st of 2017. The included in the valuation was data for all of the active employees that are involved and the retirees. If you go over to page 2 in the report, you'll see a brief summary of the number of participants. There are 75 active employees currently who will be eligible if they reach normal retirement to be able to collect retiree health benefits paid by the township. There are currently 35, and I will mention the last time we were here a few years ago, there were 80 active employees. You're going to have a shrinking number of actives because the plan has been closed to new hires after 2017. The number of retirees, though, will continue to increase, and you currently, and at the valuation date, there were 35 retirees and beneficiaries that were collecting, able to receive retiree health benefits paid by the township. What we do as actuaries is compute, and if we go over to page 4, we compute the liabilities that are associated with these benefits being provided. Currently, you're paying out about $600,000 a year in retiree health benefits. But the value of those benefits obviously is more than $600,000. Plus you have, unlike pensions, you have significant COLA increases generally in medical benefits. So we have computed what the present value is of the accrued present value of benefits likely to be paid in the, to the actives and retirees. So on page 4, the top of the page, we've shown the results by the liabilities by the various divisions in the township: general, DPW, police, and fire. There are no active fire participants anymore. But for active employees currently, the value as of the 12/31/17 of their future retiree health benefits is $30 million. The last time we were here, it was about $24 million. Part of the reason for the increase is that a newer mortality table was implemented. And when you have people living longer, obviously, that's going to create increased liabilities. For retirees, the value is $12.6 million. And the total accrued liability then is $42 million of obligation. These liabilities are computed based on assumptions which I will explain to you and show you what those were in just a minute. But from the accrued liabilities, we subtract out the funding value of assets, which is pretty much the market value of your assets as of 12/31/17. And that amount was $9 million. A large increase over the $4.6 million the last time that I was here. And that reflects increased funding by the part of the township. Extra money is being put in over and above the amount needed to pay the benefits. And in the last number of years, that's been about $700,000 a year. So that made a big difference. And of course, if we can have some good market returns, that's going to help as well in the future. So the unfunded liability then is $33.5 million. So that's the amount that gets amortized, and it's currently being amortized now over 27 years. And a payment then is made to fund that. So on the bottom of the page is a summary of the recommended and computed contribution rates. And those rates are expressed as percents of active employee payroll. Now, as you have a shrinking payroll, those percents are going to get very large. So you probably, in the future valuations, you're not going to see percents of payroll because it's kind of meaningless. But if you go down to what the total contribution is, it would be, the valuation payroll is about $4 million. But on the three bottom lines, the first line of the three down at the bottom there, the total payment based on 27-year amortization would be $3.1 million as the recommended contribution. 26-year amortization would be 3.1 million, pretty much the same. It doesn't change very much, but it increases a little bit over the 3 years until you have the next valuation. Although now you have to have them done every 2 years. Used to be every 3 years, now it's every 2. I mentioned the assumptions, and I think it's important for you to know what we assumed in making these projections and calculations of your contributions for your post-retirement benefit. The interest rate that was assumed, the rate of investment return, was 6%. And that is a relatively conservative assumption. The state has issued quote-unquote uniform assumptions that will need to be used for future fiscal years to provide information to the state. And one of the assumptions that is specified in those uniform assumptions is a 7%, a maximum of 7%. So at 6%, you are being more conservative than the state assumptions. And when I mention the state assumptions, the state can't tell you precisely how to fund your plan or what assumptions. All they can do is tell you, hey, we want to see what every municipality's obligations are for their post-retirement health benefits, and make a comparison. So if everybody submits their information on the same set of assumptions, then the state will end up preparing some sort of a report probably to show that. But that's down the road. You don't have to worry about that right now. The medical inflation rate that we assumed was 6%, decreasing down to 5% ultimately in 1/10% increments. That's less conservative than what was assumed last time. Last time we assumed 4%. And 6% seems to be I think a more reasonable assumption of actual expected medical increases. And the other change that I had mentioned was the mortality, and that's on page 8. And the mortality table, the label on it is the RP 2014. It's on the top of the page. It's an RP 2014 with MP 2017. What that means is that it's a 2014 table with generational improvements built in. So it's a relatively conservative assumption. It's projecting pretty good long lifetimes. The generational mortality has a big impact, and what the generational mortality does is say that a 60-year-old now might have let's say a 20-year life expectancy, but a person that's 20 years old now, by the time they reach 60, they may have a 25-year life expectancy or something. So I think there's a limit to how big these tables are, how long they're going to go, but that's basically how it works. And there is a new table that just came out for public plans. It's the first one that's ever been introduced for public plans, and you'll probably be hearing about that the next time you have an actuarial valuation done like this. So that essentially, the last section of the report is a summary of all the data, and that begins on page 12. And there, you know, if you're interested, you can see the distribution of your retirees by the age on page 12, and their division. And you can see the biggest group of retirees right now is between 60 and 64. But you have, you know, quite a few that are over 65 as well. And then on page 13, a little table showing the active employees and their average age and service. And of course, the average age and service of your active employees is going to keep growing as you don't have new employees coming in. So I should have mentioned earlier, your percent funded. Everybody wants to know what percent funded you are. 21.2% funded. It doesn't say that on page 4, and I should have put that in. But on page 4, if I divide the assets by the liabilities, I get 21.2%. Now for that state reporting, the state's liking a 40% funded ratio. There are many plans that have less than a 10% funded ratio. So you're doing better than many municipal plans out there. I can assure you of that. There are very few. There are a number that are at 40% and some higher. But in general, if you're at 20%, you know, there are a lot of plans that are not as funded that well. And because it's under 40, the state will be making some not requirements, but asking you, hey, what are you going to do about this to get it up to 40%? So that's another thing to consider. But on the last time we were here, the funded ratio was 14%. So it went from 14 up to 21. So that's as a tribute to it reflects the extra contributions that have been coming into the plan. And had we not used a more current mortality table, that funded ratio would be higher. I think you can be happy with the fact that there was improvement since the last valuation. The other report that you have is the report that's done for your financial statements. Governmental, and it says GASB 74, 75. Those are the statements that are used by auditors and accountants for your reporting purposes. It's basically the same information, the same result that you had in the other report. There are some, if you actually want to look at it, there's some interesting tables at the end, just the projections of how much the benefits are going to increase, are projected to increase over the years, the assets, and that is all at the end of this report. And I'd be happy to go over more of that with you if you wanted to take the time. I can certainly do that. But basically, as a bottom line, your projected contributions, if you continue to make those contributions over and above the benefit payments, there's not a projected time when there would be insufficient assets to pay for the benefits. And because of that, that's a good thing. So. I'd be happy to, I can talk a lot about this. Our firm does a lot of these valuations for municipalities, cities, and townships, and authorities, and so forth. And I've seen a wide range of results. But again, I think the important thing is to make improvement. And the next time you want to be higher than 21% funded. But if you keep making additional contributions, that will certainly help.
Trustee Thomas?
Hi.
Hi.
It's nice seeing you again.
Good seeing you as well. Good to be here.
The mortality table, for just a little bit of further explanation, this is a new table that has been designed by the state of Michigan,
Well,
correct?
the Society of Actuaries actually produces these tables.
But is this the one that the state hasn't required us to
The
use yet?
state has said for the uniform report that you have to fill out, or actuarial valuation, you're supposed to use a version of the RP 2014 table, which you are doing. So you're there already.
But that report isn't due. I know
Oh,
that
that
if
for
we use
another
the
year.
old mortality table, that our number would be a lot greater than the 21%.
Yeah, if you used an older table. If
The last table. that we used.
Exactly, yes.
And
it
now,
would.
but right now, we don't have to use this mortality table, but our superintendent Limita said, well, let's look at the real number and let's not fluff the number like other municipalities.
That's right. But other municipalities are going to have to, at least for state purposes.
So this number is really, through you to Superintendent Limita, this number is really, really not as drastic of a number as it looks, correct?
Well, it's,
Well,
yeah,
It's not where you'd like to be.
that's a big question to ask me, because my answer is no, it's as drastic as it looks.
Yeah,
yeah, but
yeah,
it's
it's
with the tables. We're ahead of them, basically, with the new guidelines.
The table, it's the table that should be used because it's the newest data that came out by the actuaries who said, look, here's the new mortality table. People are just living longer, and if people are going to live longer, then we need to base our funding mechanism on that. So I would say, yeah, it could have looked better. I mean, it's using the uniform assumptions. Would it have made sense comparing apples to apples by, look, here's how we are if we use this other mortality table? Yeah, but it's, again, we're not trying to make it look better. We're trying to find out what it really is,
What
that
the
we
real
can
number is.
base our plan on how we go about making sure that we keep moving it forward.
the uniform assumptions have larger increases built in. Then you're using a 6% is what we've got in here. But the uniform assumptions would be 8% for actives, I think, and 7% for retirees. So that would have a large impact. You wouldn't be over 20% funded maybe at that point.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rodwin, for your presentation tonight.
Well,
Appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity to work with you. It's always a pleasure to acknowledge the work that Kathy Sostak does in preparing all this information, because it's really a major, these valuations are much more difficult and involved than pension valuations, which there are just many variables, as you can imagine. So thank you.
Ms. Ling.
All right. If I'm remembering correctly, Mr. Limita, when we have settled things with the fire department, Ms. Rodwin is going to do an actuarial for the fire department, both active and current retirees, so that we can get those figures.
Well, this is the most recent one right here, and partly what she's asking about, Sandy, is we're in the process of dividing a joint fire operation that we've done with the city and the township.
Oh, I see.
And, so it's just about getting the valuations appropriate. Will those need to be updated when we determine who's going to owe what? Sure, potentially. I mean, we're going to want to base it on the most recent actuarial for those. And again, we only have 2 retirees, that's it, in fire that are eligible. No one else is eligible. None of the actives are eligible. It's just the 2 current retirees who retired before 2014.
Thank you.
Trustee Thomas.
Through you to Superintendent Limita, the same issues with Parks and Recs. too, correct?
We don't have, he's asking a question about another joint venture of Parks and Rec Commission that we're a third of a partner in with the city, the school, and the township. That, to my knowledge, there is no actuarial valuation on, there's one person who is going to be retired in a month, and then one who is eligible with those. Again, there are only 2 people eligible. But to my knowledge, I don't have an actuarial valuation done by the Parks and Rec Commission, so that would be something that we probably have to explore as we move forward.
Okay, again, thank you.
Thank you, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to approval of the treasurer's report.
That was in the consent agenda.
Oh, sorry.
Chairperson.
Sorry.
We're under operational now.
Okay, we'll move on. Board will consider a resolution to authorize the Green Valley Special Assessment District role for the approved road repaving project.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Support.
Mr. Chair, one comment before the board moves forward with this. We do have some blanks that we have to fill in, particularly on number 3 of the resolution. And number 3 says, "The roll shall be divided into 5 equal installments. The first of such installments shall be due and payable on or before," and there's a blank. And I think we should amend that to say that the first installment shall be due and payable on December 1st, 2019. And because the work's going to be done this year, the money is going to be borrowed this year, and the first payment will appear on the winter tax bill. I want to make sure that Mr. Guzak concurs with that concept. And also, continuing in that same sentence, and all subsequent installments shall be due and payable on, we should say on, not or before, December 1st each year thereafter. Then one more change in paragraph 4, interest shall accrue from, I think instead of a blank, we shall have the date that the bonds are issued in anticipation of the installments. So again, that's just recognizing that the first installment that you'll have to pay will be in December of this year. Installments will come due for the next 5 years at December 1st. And by the way, that's just when our winter tax bill comes out. You have until, what, the end of February to pay?
Right, you've got till February 28th, and then before that's due.
Good, and then again, just recognizing that the interest will accrue from the date that we close on the loan. And those are my proposed changes. If Mr. Guzak concurs, then we can carry on.
Right, and we don't have the bond date yet, because we haven't went out for bonds. We don't do that until we get the final bill.
Right, it works just for the folks in the audience, it works like a bank loan. The interest starts to run when you close that loan. And we're gonna have to close the loan sometime, depending on the capabilities of the treasurer. We may, technically you would wanna close before construction begins, because you're gonna get a 50% bill from the road commission. Sometimes.
Yeah, we've already gotten the bill. We already paid 50%.
All right, so there we go. So sometimes, and this is one of those times where we get the bill in advance. It's interesting. Mr. Hill left with his money, I guess, but the township advanced that money, and so we're able to have a little bit more freedom as far as when we begin to collect interest. And Mr. Guzak will be the decision maker in that regard as to when we'll close that loan and when interest will begin to accrue. Perfect, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Clerk Lehman, trustee Nancy will have to.
They moved to amend the resolution as presented in the packet, and then I amended that, so we will need them to approve the amendment.
I will accept make the motion to accept the amendment.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
It's a roll.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Motion approved, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, the board will consider a resolution to support the Michigan Department of Natural Resources Trust Fund grant application for the Dort Highway Extension non-motorized trail.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Mr. Thomas? Roll call vote on the...
No discussion.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, the board will consider a resolution to approve the corrective action plan for Grand Blanc Township post-employment health benefits as required by PA 202 of 2017 to address unfunded liabilities in OPEB retiree health care benefits.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Thomas.
I'd like to make formal board members that we move this to a plan for next meeting at the beginning of April.
He's got his hand up down there.
Yep. Mr. Limita.
This entire corrective action plan is due to the state no later than this Friday.
I so move to move forward. It's not
Mr.
official motion.
Mr. Laddie, could you just, or Mr. Limita, sorry, in the corrective action plan, does that, what, kind of give me an idea what's in that?
So, Public Act 202 passed a couple years ago, and they made the requirement, really it's about transparency in pension funding and retiree health care funding. They made the requirement that we start to report it as part of our audit results, and they see it, and one of the reasons being is they've been working on this going back to the early 2000s, that it was always as part of your audit, but it wasn't visible. Now they became visible, it's like they set some parameters of where you needed to be funded. You need to be above 60% funded for your pension, or you're going to have to ask for a waiver or file a corrective action plan. For your retiree health care, you need to be above 40% funded. Or it has to be less than 12% of your annual required contribution ratio to your total governmental funds. We did not meet that. In fact, again, it's based upon when we submitted it, we had to submit the new Form 5572 to the state. Last year, it was based upon the last actuarial valuation we had, which was December 31st, 2014. We were 13% funded at that time. So we had to wait to finish our corrective action plan. We submitted a waiver request. We put all the things that all the changes that we made to the system. We closed the plan to new hires. We negotiated that after anyone who retires in 2017 or beyond has to pay in retirement either $100 or $200 a month as a premium contribution. We changed the investment strategy and created a MERS retiree health funding vehicle to put that money dedicated solely towards retiree health care. We extended the number of years of service from 20 to 25 years to be qualified. We negotiated in the round of contracts 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago all of these changes to help us address the issue. One of the things we didn't have is we need to have the most current actuarial valuation so that we could submit our corrective action plan. Once they rejected our waiver, they gave us 180 days. Our 180 days will expire on March 29th for submitting the plan. So I had to create a plan that shows that at a minimum that we can achieve to make the annual required contribution. While we've been adding on the average $700,000 a year to what we were paying, and again, it was always legal to do pay-go. It's just you're just paying whatever was required for that year, but you're not buying down any of that liability. And in fact, your liability continues to grow year after year after year if you're not making at least the annual required contribution. Right now, our annual required contribution is about $3.2 million. We haven't been even making that, even though we've added an extra $1 million last year, 2 years in a row, over $1 million. We still weren't hitting our annual required contribution. So what I had to do to create the corrective action plan was to put a plan together that shows that we will not only make the annual required contribution of $3.2 million, but dedicate some portion of funding beyond that to show that we're aggressively attacking the unfunded liability that was associated with it. 3 years ago, we had a $35 million liability, $31 million unfunded. Now we've got a $42.5 million liability. Our funding level has come up, but that's great news. I mean, our funding levels come up, but our liability continues to grow also. So our plan is working. All of the things we've done in negotiating and creating a retiree health funding vehicle, all those things are working, but until we start making more than that annual required contribution, the ARC payment, our liability will continue to grow. If we continue to follow what we're doing, instead of $42 million, 2 years from now, when she does the actuarial again, we'll be at $45 million and growing. So this plan stops that. It's much more aggressive. I know it's probably shocking when you look and see that I'm recommending the police department renewal. It's been 1 mil forever, and I'm recommending that the board consider asking for that mill to be at 2.5 mils. The reason I'm doing that is that 1.5 mils, you need 1 mil for operations at the least. We spent $8.3 million providing law enforcement to this community, yet the millage we collect right now is 0.9033. We're taking in $1 million in millage funding, and we're nowhere near paying what we should be paying on retiree health funding. Police accounts for 60% of that unfunded liability. So, you guys have heard comments about when you look at the police building over there and people say, I can't believe that $10 million building over there. Well, it's sitting on a $26 million retiree health funding hole too that isn't as visible. So, we made some good progress, but I'm trying to shock you into the point of, let's go after it. Let's get aggressive about this. And if the voters approve the police operations and they like what we do, and certainly by all indications, people love our law enforcement here, if they will approve 2.5 mils, we still keep the 1 mil for operating that we always have, and we take that 1.5 mils and we dedicate it towards aggressively going after the unfunded liability. That would allow us to make the ARC, the annual required contribution that we need to, plus about $1.4 million over and above that.
Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, I agree with what you said, and then I think we discussed a little bit, because you just said that there's 1.5, the extra 1.5 should go to the OPEB, and you thought that we could put a sentence in there that we would dedicate that 1.5 for at least the first 10 years right to the OPEB, right? So you could change that verbiage just a tweak.
I can do whatever the board desires. I mean, if you're uncomfortable with 2.5 mils, we don't have to mention mils, but you're going to have to put then a dollar amount that you're going to commit to making the annual required contribution plus a dollar amount of, say, $600,000. But just know if you don't collect it in millage, it has to come from somewhere. It means we're going to have to cut back or scale back operations.
Well, I meant to leave it at the millage. Just say of the total, it's from 1 mil up to 2.5. Just say of the 2.5, 1.5 is dedicated to OPEB, and that way whatever the percentage is goes to OPEB.
Yeah, that's...
Just to clarify, we're still talking about just the corrective action plan to the state, correct?
Correct.
And in that corrective action plan, you're proposing to the board ideas to shore that big gap up in police. This is a long way off from asking the voters or anyone for some additional taxes. This is just to get through the corrective action phase, correct?
Well, if we put the corrective action plan forward, what we're saying to the state treasurer is that these are what we intend to do. Now, if the voters turn it down, the voters turn it down.
Right.
That doesn't matter. We'll have to come up with a new way of addressing it. But if you guys approve the plan, what we're saying is that this is what we intend to do over the next couple of years in our corrective action plan to address our unfunded liabilities.
What happens if this isn't turned in by, what'd you say, next week or Friday?
You'll be in non-compliance with Public Act 202. What happens after that, there's nothing in the Public Act right now that shows what it will be, but I'd rather make the changes. If what are the concerns that the board have based on the corrective action plan I've shown you?
Well, I don't want to speak on behalf of the board, but myself personally, when we talk about a steep millage increase like that, I think for one, the whole board should have some input in something like that. These are things that we will be talking to the constituents about and be asked a lot of questions about. There's been a lot of millage money that has been asked for from the residents of the township over the last year in different areas. So I think just tying something to a corrective action that we all haven't approved, I'm just not real comfortable with that. Now, I would ask, have we been in non-compliance in the past that you know of, Mr. Limita, in terms of submitting on time, or?
This is a brand new public act. This is our first time that we have to submit this.
Okay.
Of all of the municipalities in the state, I only found one who didn't submit on time.
But it's not due on time until Friday.
It's due on Friday.
So how would anybody be at it?
Ours is. Other people's are different. It's due all different dates. If you're concerned about if the mills are the only concern, we can change the language to take out the 2.5 mills and change it to a dollar amount that the board will commit to fund the annual required contribution plus X amount of dollars. But to be realistic, it should probably be $600,000 minimum.
But we're doing,
Trustee Thomas.
I'm sorry for cutting you off, Superintendent Limita, but we're already doing, at the very, very minimum, an extra $700,000.
We're not meeting the annual required contribution. We have never met the annual required contribution. The $3.2 million, we've never met that number. That's why our liability is continuing to grow. So what I'm trying to get...
We're the three new guys, so you have to catch us up on that.
So even though we have in the last few years dedicated an additional, and I put in there $602,000 in 2015, $762,000, $1 million in 2017, $1 million, a little more than that in 2018, those still didn't get us up to the annual required contribution of currently, what she showed you tonight was $3.2 million. We have to at least make $3.2 million or our liability continues to grow. So even though we've put an additional $1 million on top of the pay-go amount, we haven't hit the annual required contribution. We need to do more. To really get the plan approved and to get it funded, you need to approve at least that you're going to make, if you want this plan to be approved, you have to put in that you intend to make at least the annual required contribution of $3.2 million plus something that will address, I mean, we're woefully underfunded. We're having to file a corrective action plan if we're less than 40%, and we were at 13%. Luckily, we're back up at 21 now. We've made progress, but we're still woefully underfunded. And if we adopt the plan I gave you, I project that by 2025, we could be at 40% funded.
Right. So within 10 years, we're going to be at 40% if we follow the plan.
40.
Mr. Laddie?
I have a question for Superintendent Limita, and you may not be able to answer this, but that language particularly, and I recognize we don't have a full board here, but it says that the township will request a voter-approved 2.5 mils. I realize that this corrective action plan has to be a good faith representation of what our plan is. Do you think we would comply with the requirements of the submission if we said the township anticipates requesting a 2.5 mil increase? Just because we're not, the board doesn't want to commit to the 2.5 mils tonight, but they may do it in the very near future. Do you think we'd still meet the reporting requirement if we said that we anticipate that request?
Yeah, we can actually submit anything we like. They're going to do a review of ours. If we get it in on time, they'll review it in April. If they don't agree with it because our language wasn't soft enough as far as a commitment goes, it would be rejected. They would decline a corrective action plan and resubmit it. We have 45 days to resubmit the plan for acceptance.
Could we have that question answered in 45 days if we needed to?
Mr. Chair.
Trustee Massey.
Mr. Chair, according to the council statement, anticipate. Whatever we say, it's an estimate. Don't use the word estimate. Okay? It's not certain because we don't know what the voters may say.
You're right. Right. But this is just what we will do.
Yes.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yes. I mean, I just use the word estimate. Okay? Yep. Same thing. And participate.
You're correct.
Yes. So I don't mean don't put estimate in that. I'm just using a different word. Okay. So I agree with the council recommended. recommends.
Trustee Thomas.
Through you to Superintendent Lemata. My quandary is the 2.5 mils. I understand that, and we do have the best police force, and we do have to keep our folks going and everything else. We have to take care of this liability that was incurred by previous boards and such. But I personally, I want to see stronger language that it's going to be used for unfunded liability in the OPEB situation. And I don't think it's fair, I don't think it's fair that we do this without Trustee Mansur and Supervisor Bennett. So I really like going along with Attorney Laddie's suggestion. I could go with that.
I think, let me say something, Mr. Chair. Didn't we discuss this in February? I think we did.
We
never talked about the millage, Joe.
I didn't say the millage.
Oh, I've been talking about going to 2.5 mils for 2 years as a recommendation for the board. When we did the waiver plan, and I thought we'd get rejected, and we did. When it came back, I said, number one, I have to see what the actuarial says. I have to have the actuarial before I can look at it. And then once I got the actuarial information, I based it on 2.5 mils because, again, we're spending $8 million, but we only collected $1 million on millage for police, and they have tremendous support from the community. If the millage failed, we can still take it out, but it means we have to, for me, it's hitting the number. I mean, it's not, whether it comes from the 2.5 mils or you guys just say we're going to commit to the number is fine with me, and take the mills out and just commit that we're going to make the annual required contribution plus $500,000 is more of an important commitment than the millage amount, because if you have to take the $500,000 out of current operating, it means we have to go to the police budget and cut out an additional $1 million, which, you know, maybe we don't need our own dispatch. Maybe we can use 911 or 911 dispatch, right? So, I mean, 911 calls can be routed through. I mean, part of what we do is the level of service that we offer is why we spend as much as we do on community policing. There's ways we can cut $1 million out of that budget, certainly. But what we don't want to do is not agree to at least fund the annual required contribution and then some. So if it really was the millage that's the problem, I would scratch the, you know, we'll take the 2.5 mils out and just put, we'll request a you know, voter approved millage renewal and address unfunded liability with an additional $500,000 over the annual required contribution and leave the millage out.
But I'm not saying that I'm against increasing the millage, so I don't want to use the terminology of renewal of the 1 mil. I'd like to say, you know, I'd like that to be a little bit more open, but I'm not against the 2.5, but we need to talk about it. We have not sat down as a board once and discussed police millage, not once.
Well, then let's take the millage out completely. I can take the millage out of this entire thing and just change it that what the board is going to approve is that we're going to fund the annual required contribution,
which is 3.1, right?
$3.1 million plus
500.
$500,000.
So that's 3.6.
Okay, but
and don't even talk about millage whatsoever.
But that's absolutely tying us into that number.
No, it's not. It's tying you into, I mean, that's the number we need to hit. We should be, we have to cover the ARC. We have to cover the ARC plus something.
And then you'd rather do it that way than going with the way that Attorney Laddie suggested?
If the millage is the issue, I would just take the millage out of it and fund and put the money there. Then if you guys don't want to put the millage forward at, you know, whatever you want to put the millage, let's just take it out of our corrective action plan, though. What we're committing to is the dollar amount. How we raise that dollar amount doesn't matter. Whether it's in police millage or if it's just in general fund or it's cuts to
You're going to have to raise them.
But
operations.
Folks, listen, my fellow board, I'm not against raising the millage. I just am against doing it without discussing it and going through the whole thing, especially with Scott and Al not here. That's my quandary.
So let's eliminate the millage.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I'll ask you to approve it with eliminate the discussion of millage, but let me change that sentence. Let me revise our resolution so that it says that we're going to, prospective actions by the board is to meet the annual required contribution plus $500,000
Mr. Chair, if you were
by 2020.
If you were looking for a consensus, I'm good with that.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say, you know, since I've been on the board, Superintendent Limita has done a good job at, you know, keeping us aware, constantly reminding us where our underfunded, unfunded liabilities are. And the police department does make up a big lion's share of that. And, you know, I don't think anybody on the board wants to kick the can down the road or not address these problems. It's just, you know, I want to make sure that the flexibility is in place with this corrective action plan so that the board as a whole has an opportunity to strategize. How do we plug some of that liability? Maybe it's a millage, maybe it's not, but so I'm satisfied. I don't know if the rest of the board is with removing the millage language from the corrective action plan and just going with the dollar amount.
Joe?
Yes. Well, I like what the attorney said, anticipate.
Two different things we're talking about.
I think that, I would suggest that you should follow Mr. Lehman's recommendation. He's the author of it, he knows what the requirements are, and I'm just here to be, not trying to be difficult, I'm just trying to offer a solution. But I want this to be a good faith representation of what our commitment is, and I think that Mr. Lehman has hit on something that's a little more concrete, but also not an overextension of your finances, frankly. Still leaves you some room.
Mr. Thomas?
I'd like to make a resolution that we accept the superintendent's recommendation of the resolution with the amendment of
3.1 plus 500,000.
Correct. Of the ARC plus 500,000.
Yeah.
Until, didn't you state a specific year, Mr. Limita?
By 2020. And we're gonna make the ARC plus $500,000 by 2020. So that gives you time through 2019 because we already got the budget out there. Gives us time to decide what you're gonna do, whether it's police millage, whether it's cut operations, it's whatever. But I don't know if they'll approve it, but it's worth, you know.
Yeah, I just want to wait until.
But it takes the millage question out.
Okay.
And that way we still make it, we deliver it on time. Worst case scenario is they reject it and it comes back to us and we have 45 days to come up with a new plan.
So that's a roll call, right?
Mr. Thomas made the motion. Did anybody second that?
I'll second.
Well, the motion does, if no second.
I second it.
All right. Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Myself, yes.
Okay. The board will consider a motion to approve the superintendent to be named as the authorized signator and the finance director be named as optional signator for all MERS contracts.
Mr. Chair, I move to support this, but I think it needs to be revised. Well, first let me ask you a question. What do you mean by optional signature? What do you mean by that? Can you expound on that?
So it means one of the two of us has to be available to sign. Either the superintendent's position or the finance director's position would have to be available to sign any of the information from MERS. Right now what happens is we have to include, everything has to come to the board so that we have minutes that we can send in. So right now, for example, we had a MERS audit come in and they looked at some of the plans and they came back and said, well, we need to make some minor changes to your plans that better reflect who's in it. So now I've got to bring the plans, again, the full plans to the board. Can you review these plans and approve them? Or I could just sign it, or Director Sostak could just sign it and say, these are the correct plans. It's not creating plans, it's being a signatory for MERS to deal with the plans we currently have. It requires a board action to create a new plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I thought I heard another name. That's why I don't know what I was hearing, but that's, okay, I'm good with that.
Mr. Thomas?
Through you to Superintendent Limita. God, I'm sorry. How is it being handled now? The supervisor and the clerk are...
No, I still sign, or she can sign, but it has to be attached to board minutes. Everything has to have a board motion. So I have to come to you right now to make the changes that we're requesting. I have to come to you with 3 separate plans and ask you if you will approve the plans, and then I have to wait for the minutes to be approved and then submit them back to MERS with the minutes attached for everything. This includes like resolutions, participation agreements, administrative services, withdrawal agreements. Really what we're talking about is minor accounting, housekeeping changes to the existing plans, and we don't have the authority to do that. I have the authority to sign, but I have to include minutes that you guys authorized me to sign, even though I have the authority to sign. What it does, it stops it from having to come to the board every time I need to do something on a MERS contract.
What if we, just a question, what if we had the supervisor and or treasurer clerk sign?
They only need one person, but I mean, I can add, they had 2 options. I put the superintendent's position, the finance director. You can put somebody else as an option on there, it doesn't matter. You can put the supervisor instead of me on there, I don't care.
Wouldn't you be more comfortable having an elected position, elected officer do that instead?
No, I don't have any concerns with it as it is, and this was MERS recommendation.
Right.
But you guys do whatever you want to do, I don't care.
Questions.
Ms. Lane?
One of the things that was in this form had to do with an employee asking for service credits. What would be the policy that you would follow if an employee said, I want to have my service credits added to my years of service from a, let's say, military or previous employer?
That policy is, anything with service credits is clearly dictated by the governing board when we set up the policy about what you're going to do about who's eligible for service credits and what can go in there. This is if that person meets those qualifications, rather than coming to the board saying, hey, this person meets the qualifications, can you guys authorize me to sign this contract? It doesn't change that they still have to meet the same qualifications for service credit.
I don't know what, I don't recall right now what it is, but if someone came and it wanted service credits, the way I recall the procedure is an actuarial study is done for how much it would be for that person to purchase that service, the 1, the 2, or the 3 years, and then the board...
This doesn't change that policy.
But then the board is the board's policy that the employee pays for all of the service monies that are needed. Let's say if it takes $90,000 or $100,000 to buy those years of service because of his age and his pay level and everything, that would have to come back to the board for approval so that we know that that person is putting in the money and it's not going on to our unfunded liability, because I know some of these things were not well addressed when this was started, and that's why I don't know what the policy is.
That has been addressed a long, long time ago in MERS policy itself, as far as that goes. None of this changes the policy. It changes all of the same things that you've just requested. There is no change to that. It's exactly the same.
Where the employee, well, the option years ago when I worked in Oakland County was a municipality could have the opportunity to look at that amount, and the employee could say, will you pay half and I'll pay half. Municipality could say yes if they wanted to, but the municipality I worked for said, no, if you want to buy service credits, you pay the full actuarial liability right up front.
Yeah, we're not, nobody in the township's authorized to make a deal with somebody on what they're gonna pay in service credits. That would be a negotiation, somebody's coming to work for us, that's gonna be a negotiation that's gonna come to the board who sets the salary for the person who is coming on.
This is for even a union employee.
I understand, nothing changes.
So that would,
Kathy,
you would always bring that to a board?
Yeah.
nothing changes from a policy perspective. The only thing this is deciding who has the authority to sign MERS documents. Me, the finance director. If you want to make it the supervisor, the clerk, the treasurer, I don't care. Just make somebody so we don't have to bring it every time there's a slight change to anything, that we don't have to bring the documents to the full board. I don't care who your signatory is. You can take me off and put the supervisor or put the clerk. I don't care, but let's get somebody on there as signatories so that we don't have to take every minor housekeeping issue to make it an agenda item to approve it.
Trustee Massey.
Well, I see this. I would like for it to stay as it is, because here's the argument. Anytime you tie an elected official to something, we cannot hold an elected official accountable for anything. That's been tested. It's been well discussed here. So, as it stands right now, they're held accountable. And I don't want to go into any further detail, but they are really held accountable. And if you don't know what I mean by that, you should know by now, okay? Elected official can do anything they want to, this board cannot do anything.
So you're saying leave it as it is?
As it is. Now you got accountability. If you go in the other way, you don't have accountability. It's just that plain to me.
Well, that's why MERS set it up that way. I mean, MERS is the one, isn't that correct, Dennis? That MERS is suggested it's the finance director and the superintendent, right?
I don't see this in
Yes.
the MERS.
Right.
Where's that located in our packet? Not in the packet, but I see that the memorandum that's, I'm sorry,
Mr. Thomas.
Mr. Chair, through you to Superintendent Limita. I see in the memorandum that it was suggested by Colleen, but I don't see where it says MERS.
Actually, her memorandum reads, MERS has requested for the township to designate authorized signatories. And then attached to that is the MERS sheet for putting it together.
Yeah, I see
can
that, but
see
they
who
don't
the Grand Blanc Township contact information is and who, right now we manage the plan. Right now we
Right.
are the administrators of the plan.
So it only makes sense they would sign it.
So what?
I
So-
said, the finance director and the superintendent are managing the plan, correct?
Right,
No.
the finance director is our primary, right now, is our
Because you're managing
primary
it and you're the contact
manager
with them, right?
of
So
this plan. I'm
that's what
listed
you
as the
sign.
highest administrative position. Scott Bennett is listed as the highest elected official. That's
Right.
who your administrators are for your MERS plan
Right.
currently.
You see, I disagree with Joe on this. I think that, I agree with you, Superintendent Limina, that it needs to be changed.
No, I do not agree to that. We're going back to, we want to have accountability.
I don't think we're talking about the same thing.
We're talking about the same thing.
As of right now, Dennis and Colleen sign it, or they can't sign it until they wait.
I'm not
till-
talking about now, I'm talking about what's at hand, what's before us.
Well,
That's all
So
I'm talking
we're in
about.
agreement.
I'm not voting on anything that's in the back room. I'm voting on something that's
you and I are
present.
talking the same.
Yes. So we're looking at accountability. We've been talking about the board should have, whoever we designate, there should be some kind of accountability.
I could go along with supervisor and superintendent signing.
No. Finance director. Once you bring in the supervisor, you don't have accountability anymore.
Well, the accountability is the voters.
No.
The finance director right now is the administrator of your
Right.
plan. She does everything on your plan.
That's right.
He knows everything, so
And-
she
and I
should be
just-
the one that's signing this.
That's right. It's just that clear.
If I can, you guys, here's, the resolution says this, the employer wishes to designate certain job positions, the holder of which may sign the MERS contracts relating to the adoption amendment, termination of MERS products, defined benefit, service credit, purchase approvals, on behalf of the employer to implement decisions and actions of the governing body. We can't create or do, you guys have to still be the initiator of new plans. All this does is who gets to sign the dang paper.
Yeah, yeah, it's fine.
All right, do we have a,
There was a motion, but no second, Mr. Chair.
Second.
You second?
Yeah.
Okay.
okay, call for the vote. All those in favor?
It was a resolution.
No resolution?
Yes.
It's not a resolution.
It's a motion.
It
It's a
is.
motion.
The
Doesn't
form
say.
that we're sending in is a resolution.
Here it says motion.
I know, but this says resolution.
Well,
Who put together this?
Okay. Okay.
Okay? Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Guzak,
Yes.
Mr. Massey,
Yes.
Mr. Adkins.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, the board will consider a motion to accept as a second reading and approval of the DDA Development Plan and Tax Increment Financing Plan Ordinance with immediate effect upon publication.
So moved.
Hold on, the only change is this is actually a first reading, not a second. And so we'll be having our second reading at our April meeting.
So we don't make a motion on this, one, correct?
Yes, we do.
Oh, the first reading?
You still have to accept the first meeting, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we held a public.
Yeah, we held a public hearing.
Mr. Latta, do you still accept, do we still need to accept the first reading then?
It is, the first reading is what it is.
Okay.
It's just a motion, right?
It's a motion to adopt an ordinance, the first reading of an ordinance, adopting the DDA plan and TIF plan.
Do I still call on those? Who was the,
I'll support that. Would you like that on a roll
I
call
would,
vote,
please.
Mr. Chair? Thank you. I
Well-
mean, Mr. Attorney.
Yes, I recommend to the chair that he accept the.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Guzak.
Yes.
Mr. Massey.
Yes.
Mr. Atkins.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Thank you, gentlemen.
okay, we'll move on to future positioning, any committee reports. Mr. Thomas?
No.
Mr. Guzak?
No.
Myself, none. Miss Lane?
I can tell you that we have over 1,600 requests for absentee ballots, and we have prepared 650 roughly for mailing for the May 7th special election.
Clerk Lane,
Yes, sir.
through Chairman. You set up a meeting for the task force with Joe and I for the elections committee.
We're going to do that when we get back from the annual meeting after next week in order to meet the timeframes under state law for appointing election workers.
Mr. Massey?
No.
Okay. Now the board will move to accept the Grand Blanc Fire Department 2018 year-end review report from Chief Burdette.
On page 17.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just want to take a few moments. We prepared our final report for 2018. I must admit I did forget to put in the information regarding the 2019 millage approval, but I wanted to thank the public for their support of the fire department. 2018, we were finally able to fill our one full-time open position that we had for a firefighter, and also added on our new assistant, part-time administrative assistant. The approval of the millage
The 1 mil covers our operational, the 0.5 goes on for our capital expenditures into 2019. As we go through the report, numbers are hard to see, but they're in the lower left-hand corner or lower right-hand corner as we go on. I'm on to page number 7. These are the incidents. The Grand Blanc Fire Department responded to 761 incidents last year. 10% of those being actual fires. The majority of the calls that we answer are covered service calls, good intent calls, or alarm malfunctions. So it gives you an idea of the actual fire department's need within the community. On page number 8, on a sad note, we had one of our major losses. We had one fire-related death this year, which happened in the city at Sunset Apartments. Luckily, a neighbor was there who closed the door to the apartment, which contained the fire to the actual apartment itself. So there's minimal damage, but we did have one fire-related death. At the bottom of page 8 is our major saves, losses, and property value. Fire department was able to save 99% of the total property that were involved in incidents in last year. So it was an extremely good year for us in property saves.
Just so you know, these pages are.
Just here. Way at the bottom of the spiral.
Oh,
There they are. It's found it. There you go. It's hard to see, I understand that. On the next page, one of the topics that we have questioned about numerous times is the topic of mutual aid. Fire department responded to 24 incidents outside of our community last year. We received mutual aid 1 time. So that goes to it speaks to the fact that our firefighters are extremely professional. Not often do we need assistance from other departments because we are well equipped and well trained. One of the major topics that has been going on for years are response times. Last year, the fire department responded 79% of the time within a 7-minute goal within our jurisdiction. The graph on page number 10 is a little bit confusing, but what it shows you is within the first 7 minutes, that's your 79 or 71%, I'm sorry, 79% that we responded to within the 7 minutes. The last portion of that bar graph, the 11 minutes or greater, includes our secondary trucks. That means if we have a larger fire, our primary truck has already responded, we're there within 6 minutes. Within 11 minutes, our secondary truck is en route and on scene at that point. So you have a little bit of a time gap there. Gives you an idea of how long it takes for additional trucks to arrive on scene. Going back to the mutual aid, when we request mutual aid, people have to remember the 11 minutes is now gone. We're talking close to maybe 20 minutes in some cases, even up to 30 depending upon who we need. Because it takes time for those departments to have the staff respond into their station and then they respond out to our incident. So depending upon where it is, it could take a little bit longer and how many people we need. So that 11 minutes is just for us. Page 11 gives you a breakdown of the incidents by day of the week. Surprisingly, we're pretty well even off, even throughout the entire week. Friday having a slight bump in the incidents. On page 12 are the incidents by the time of the day. You'll see most of our incidents take place between 8 and 4 p.m. and at 4 p.m. to midnight being the next highest. After midnight, it's a little bit slower for us. But the key point to this is that we are staffed, fully staffed, with the 4 firefighters at the station between those time frames of 8 a.m. and midnight. After midnight, we go down to 3 with 1 officer on call. As we move on to page 13, our fire inspections, 114 general inspections occurred last year. We did see a marked decrease in the number of re-inspections necessary. So that means the first time we went out, the inspection passed. When we have the secondary inspections, primarily it's maybe just because of a exit sign not properly lit and notations are made, and we just go back and do a secondary inspection on those items. On page 14, one of the key things that we changed this year from last year was the inspection of the mobile food trucks. The food truck festival was very successful. And the city has also opened that up to alternative days other than the first Friday of the month. So we felt it necessary, instead of going out and inspecting food trucks every single time, was to inspect them once, note it, have the sticker displayed on the truck, so as we go out and do the inspections, we can see what truck's already been inspected. And if it hasn't been inspected, we take care of that at that time. Okay. On page 15, one of the key things here is that engine company inspections. It is where our fire engine with the crew that's on duty that day go out and performs inspections in the community. We feel it's extremely important that that takes place because that's educational material or education for the firefighters that are on duty that day to see some of these businesses and what we carry in them. For example, we recently toured the Magna plant, magnificent facility, very large. There's a lot of fire protection in there that the firefighters have to know about. On page 16, last thing I have to note there is the amount of complaints from the public that we received. We received 9 last year. And then one key thing here is that when we receive those complaints, we go out, we talk with the owner, we justify the complaint, or we talk with the owner and have it corrected immediately. Very minor incidents that we have there. Of course, we do child safety seat inspections by appointment. We continue to install smoke alarms. This last year we installed 26, but we plan to double that for this next year. Also, we're very active still in the community. The annual duck race, our open house obviously was still another great success. And one thing that we did this year was we were contacted by the local a local parent to help the football team take the state championship football down to the Pontiac Stadium. We just protected them as they ran through our community. One of the other things the fire department is very proud of is the training that we continually strive to improve upon. Jeremy Oxford, firefighter Oxford, this year received his certificate from Eastern Michigan University for the School of Staff and Command Executive Leadership Program. This is a program that is teaching future leaders of the fire service. Also, Inspector Keller received a certification as an arson investigator from the state of Michigan. Firefighter Barron attended the arson investigation course in the National Fire Academy. Firefighters Frank, Jones, and Hertzberg received certifications of Fire Officer Command classes, and also firefighter Hertzberg received his first level certification for fire safety inspection at the National Fire Protection Association. The last thing I'll highlight is the staff of the firefighters. The firefighters are the key to the success of this department. Whether we're full or part-time does not matter. It's the firefighters that are to make this program very successful. These are the individuals that are home, relaxing with their families, that will answer the call when they pager calls for us to come out and help out. And with that, that's this year's report.
Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chair, to the chief.
Yes.
In reading this total report earlier, you have had the child safety seat inspections and you have had the smoke alarms, but what happened with Genesis? I mean, why did they back out of the program, and how can we help you? What do we need to do to get more smoke alarms so that you can do that program even bigger than what you're planning to do it?
Well, we'll answer the first question regarding the child safety seats. What happened at Genesis is they lost their insurance bonding to do this program. We're already taken care of. We do not supply the seat. Individuals come to us with the seat already. We just assure that it's installed safely. And we just educate them on how to do that. We're fine with that. There's nothing wrong with that. The smoke detectors, well, we have a CDGB fund or a grant that's been asked for this year to put out some carbon monoxide and smoke detectors over in the Heights subdivision this year. So we'll have an improved presence there. Also, we still continue to partner with Red Cross. So if anyone needs a smoke detector installed, they can receive up to 3 free. We will come out and install it.
They received that as a grant through the National Fire Service. And that's the only stipulation, is that the fire department has to come out and install it.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, I realize we lost some. Mr. Limita, could we have used some of that money that we just lost in CDBG monies to have enhanced this Durand Heights program?
We did have CDBG funds available for fire, but I don't know that they would have approved additional funds for that or not.
Okay.
Right now they're working on, we didn't lose that funding yet, just so you know. The streets that you guys approved, we're looking to see if we can use CDBG funds to accomplish what we would back off from doing Howe Road this year. If we can use CDBG funds to attach that to Wakefield Road, so we may be coming back to you at the beginning of next month with a request to
good.
change and use the entire leftover allotment of CDBG funds. So it isn't gone yet.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Do we need,
No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Thomas, what was that motion?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
but did we didn't approve the acceptance of his report?
Is it?
You don't have to.
Don't have to?
No,
Okay.
why was it safe?
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
Good job, Ryan.
I had to do that hand at least once.